Just a quick note, if you're working from the PDF pattern, that the final two sheets, which are the template sheets, when you're printing them, you must make sure you print them at 100%. Some computer drivers or printer drivers and computers will automatically resize your thing you're printing, your file, to fit the page, but these patterns are specifically designed to be a certain size so that they fit the pipe cleaners and all those bits and pieces inside that you need them to. So make sure when you come to print out your patterns, you choose do not resize, 100% actual size. The rest of the pattern doesn't matter hugely, so you can resize that if you want to, but these two template sheets must be actual size. These ones are printed onto A4 paper, but they will equally fit onto US letter paper as well. You may crop a little bit off the bottom and the top, but the actual templates themselves will easily fit onto US letter paper at 100% actual size. So yeah, just bear that in mind when you're printing. For this first step, we need to trace the templates that we're going to use to make the body and the dress. Don't worry about the wings and the star yet for the wand. We'll just do the bits that are made out of felt to begin with. So you need both of the template sheets. There's one for the body and one for the clothes, and you'll find them at the back of your pattern, whether you've got the PDF pattern or the pattern that comes with the kit. You'll also need your freezer paper. Freezer paper is a kind of paper that is or was designed to be used to wrap food for the freezer, but it's more commonly used nowadays by quilters and sewers and people who make templates out of it, because it's got you can temporarily stick it to your fabric and cut exactly around the line, which means you end up with really precise shapes. The way it works is that it's got one matte paper side and then one plastic coated side, that's the shiny side. And when you press it onto your fabric, the plastic film melts a little bit and forms a temporary glue to hold it to your fabric, and then when you're finished you just peel it straight off and it doesn't leave any residue. So that's how we're going to be making the templates. Your freezer paper should be just about enough to fit one side of the fold. If you've got it in the kit, it's got a fold in the middle. One side of the fold will fit over the body pieces and one side will fit over the clothing pieces. So just to make it easier to manage, I'm going to cut my freezer paper in half, just along that line. Doesn't have to be neat. And just like with the other two characters, if you're stitching the whole set and you've already done Cinder Mouse and Mouse Charming, you don't need to watch this video. You can do it, doesn't hurt. I've got a few little extra bits that I do slightly differently, but they are all described in the instructions on the sheet of instructions that comes with your kit or your PDF pattern. So you can work it out from there, but there is no need. The techniques for these two bits are the same. So what we do is you can just hold the paper in place and trace over the patterns, but I'm going to use some washi tape to hold it down, which means to stick the two pieces of paper together, which means we can move them around as much as we want without jogging our tracing. And so washi tape is just anything with a low tack, masking tape or washi tape, some kind of tape that isn't too sticky and won't tear your paper. So I'm just going to tear a few little tabs to stick around and hold things in place, and I'm just going to peel them on and off the palm of my hand just to remove a bit more of the tack, the stickiness, so that it definitely won't tear the paper when I come to peel off my patterns. So just line up the freezer paper shiny side down. You want to be drawing on the papery matte side. Line it up over your template sheet and just stick the washi tape, if you're going to be using washi tape, in a few places around the edge. And then take a sharp-ish pencil and we are going to transfer all of the outlines, obviously, but then you'll find some marks. So there's an eye mark, mouth, ear markers, a tail mark on the back body. So you need to transfer all of those bits as well. Just a few quick notes on the tracing. You will find it easier to trace on the inside of a curve. So if your hand is on, so this curve goes that way, so you want your hand to be on the inside of that curve. If you imagine it was a circle and you're inside that circle, you'll find it easier to trace that way. And the other thing is to make it accurate. If you use sort of short, feathery movements and a sharp pencil, instead of one long continuous mark where you don't take the pencil off, you're much more likely to stay on the lines this way. So I always make little short movements to trace. And you'll see I've just already flipped it around, and I move it around a lot. That's where the washi tape comes in particularly handy. So I will go ahead and trace all of those outlines for all of the 3 shapes. I would also probably just transfer some of the writing on it so I remember which piece is which. So for this one I would put left front body and light brown felt. If you think you'll remember them, then don't worry too much. The few that I definitely would recommend noting, even if you don't note on the body pieces what they are, make sure you mark the ears. So you've got a left brown and a left peach, and similarly down here. So obviously you would normally have drawn around that first. The reason for that is that the ears are all look a very similar shape, but they are designed to fit specifically on one or other side of the head, and the way you layer them up is quite important. So if you remove those labels before you're ready, or if you don't label them, you can get in a bit of a muddle later. So go ahead and trace all of the body pieces and transfer all of the relevant marks, and then you just need to transfer the dress piece on this sheet. You don't need to transfer the others. So this big shape in the middle for the dress, you don't need to transfer this centre mark, the one that goes horizontally. That is just to show you what I mean when I say fold it in half. I mean fold it in half that way rather than that way. Similarly, the back seam lines, you don't need to transfer those, and the hem bit, that will be obvious to you once you get going. That's just to make it clearer to you when you're working on it. But you do need to transfer this gather line. Don't cut into it, just cut around the edge, but don't transfer the don't cut through that bit. So I will go ahead and trace all of those and then come back to you when we're ready to cut them out. Okay, so you'll see I've traced all the pieces, just as a bit of a checklist to make sure you've transferred all the marks that you need to. You've got a back tail marker on the back body, eyes on both, ear markers on both, and mouths on both of these ones. And then you need to make sure you've transferred that gather line to the dress piece, and make sure you trace them all with the shiny side down, so you should be drawing on the matte papery side. Once you've traced all of those, we need to cut them out. So the way that I cut them is to rough cut a shape first of all. So I just roughly cut around it. This just means that you don't have to be dealing with a huge piece of unwieldy paper all in one go. And then let me just zoom in so that you can see what I'm doing without it being blurry. Okay, so when I'm cutting, you need to make sure you're as close to the line as possible. The same as when you were tracing, you needed to make it as accurate as possible. These shapes are very small and can be quite fiddly, so a small variation on the line can mean a big difference to the look of your final mouse. So it doesn't matter where you start around the edge, I'm just going to start around the top. The way that I cut them, obviously using your paper scissors, because you'll blunt your fabric ones if you try and use those, is I keep my scissors facing the same way roughly at all times, and I turn the paper as I go around curves instead of turning the scissors around the curve. And that way you get a much neater line. So as I come up to this neck curve, I'm just rotating the paper as I slowly move the scissor blades together. And that, you'll see, that's left me with a really nice smooth curve. So you'll end up with much neater edges if you do it that way. When you come to these arms, I've designed them to make sure there is space to fit all the pipe cleaner and stuff and the stitches on to the tips of these arms, but they are quite skinny. So if you're nervous about cutting it, about not having enough space, or if your stitches you think are going to be a bit chunkier, then if you're in any doubt, just cut a millimetre or so outside of these lines instead of exactly on the lines. You don't want to cut any smaller than these lines. The lines as they are the perfect size, but as I say, it's better to go slightly larger than too small if you are worried. So I'm just working my way around, moving the paper as I go. You'll see my scissors are not really moving. It's just the paper. I'm going to lop that bit off and carry on around there. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out all of these shapes, and then I'll come back to you in a second and show you how to transfer the marks. The final thing you need to do once you've cut out all these pieces is just to make a few preparations for transferring the marks when you come to put them on the fabric. So obviously you can't trace through felt to see these marks when you're wanting to transfer them. So the way that I like to do it is I make a few little cuts in the templates just so that I can draw through the template with my water erasable marker when the time comes. So the way I do it is to cut along this mouth line, make a couple of cuts where these ear markers are, and I do that on both the front side pieces, so mouth and ears. And then you can do this with, you can do it either by just poking, grab a pin, you can either poke a pin through the eye hole and just wiggle it around, but if you've got one, this is a lot quicker, neater way of doing it. It's just a standard single hole punch, and I've just got the tiny 2mm setting on this. It just makes it quicker. So I'm going to punch those 2 eye holes out. But as I say, a pin does the job equally well, it's just a bit slower. And then you need to make a hole where this tail marker is as well. So again, just like the eyes, you can use a pin or you can use the hole punch, and you do it just where the 2 lines of the cross meet. And then the final thing you need to do is make a cut along this gather line so that we can draw through it onto the felt. So to do that, fold the template in half so that the ends meet. So that's all the same, and then you're going to take your scissors and cut from the folded side. Make sure you've got this lined up because it gets quite slim towards the end, so make sure these lines are exactly together, and then cut along this line from the fold upwards, and you go around this slight curve, and then you want to take it up to about, so you've got about 1 centimetre or ½ an inch left at the end, and leave that attached. And then when you open it up, what that does is you can then stick it to your felt as one solid piece, so that you won't really see the difference in the line when you iron it on, but then you can peel that little bit back and draw along that line to mark the gather line on your felt. So that's all the templates done, and now we're ready to put them on our felt.